Life in a rural area for a young man full of attainable prospects is such that must be discouraged by all and sundry owing to limited opportunities there. Lawrence, a young talented boy, have had all his life experience in his ancestral home of Ndemili, but felt it was time to chart a new course of life. Each dawn in the village reminded him of how far he had come, but every sunset whispered of how much farther he could go. The city was not just a place on the map, it was the stage where his dreams demanded to be heard. To this effect, he would have to engage the only friend he has in the city, Steve, to inform him of his intentions to migrate to the city for newer opportunities. As a result of the poor network coverage in his village, he repeatedly dialed Steve's number until he was able to get him on the line. Steve eventually picked his call, and Lawrence couldn't give it a break as he went on telling him how he was tired of the village and the fact that he couldn't further his career. He appealed to Steve to believe in him and accommodate him in the city, assuring him his creativity will earn them fame. A handful of days on, he got to the city and Steve took him to his yet-to-be-completed one-bedroom flat.
Everything I want to understand, senior man. Now the one bedroom flat where tell me say they stay now be this.
Nah, the one bedroom be this. Just no look this small time now. Don't look this POP finish. We don't buy everything. Come if this thing now you get 2 toilets for inside this house. So now this one bed. Come I go show you. Come go show you inside the rooms there.
Contrary to what he had told Lawrence over the phone, Steve lived in an apartment that was still under construction. But then, he prided himself as one who lived comfortably in the city. He took Lawrence around, convincing him that he would get used to the place and enjoy some comfort too. Though he had come from the village, his expectation was cut short as Steve lived almost like a peasant. Doubt creeped into his heart, and he begins to wonder if the city really holds any future for him, or if he too was destined to fail. It was an inner battle between giving up and holding up to hope. Not long after Lawrence had arrived, the caretaker of the uncompleted apartment showed up to inform Steve that the owner of the place would be coming back in few days and work has to commence immediately. Steve's tenancy was without the knowledge of the landlord, but a favor he had received from the kind-hearted caretaker. He didn't pay a dime to the caretaker. In consequence, evicting him wouldn't be a problem. He pleaded with Steve that he would have to leave and go squat somewhere else. However, the caretaker made him to understand he really wished there were other ways. Such a bad news few moments after the arrival of his friend? Steve shrugged his shoulders and turns to Lawrence.
Bad luck, oh. Let's get where you call me, don't be.
They both set out to find somewhere else to squat. Though it didn't sit right with Lawrence, he would have to follow his friend unhappily as he wasn't going to dump his ambitions. He found it difficult to accept the reality before him, but as he attempts to question Steve, his opinions were cut short with Steve asking him to calm down. Steve claimed nothing was happening at the moment that hasn't happened to him before. To him, it wasn't a big deal, but common life challenges. Lawrence and his friend came across Anthony as they walked the street. Steve suggested they approach Anthony and maybe he could be of help to them, but Lawrence, who was already tired of the situation, vehemently opposed until Steve was able to convince him on the need to keep trying with faith. Steve went ahead, greeted Anthony as soon as he got off the phone, while Lawrence looked away without interest until the conversation got interesting. Without mincing words, Steve with a smiling face narrated their predicament to soft-hearted Anthony, who had given him a listening ear already. He asked them how he could be of help, as it was unusual to be accosted by random helpless men. It was at the point Lawrence came in and went straight to the point as he felt his friend was given too much explanations. To Lawrence, he just wanted to be certain he has a place to lay his head. Steve further claimed they were young men with fire in their eyes and hunger in their hearts, willing to take on any legitimate work that came their way. It wasn't pride or comfort that guided them, but the understanding that every honest effort, whether small or hard, was a stepping stone. Lawrence wasn't there for long talks and his attitudes didn't go unnoticed. At some point, the young man was displeased with his attitude, but for the appeal of Steve, he decided to give his number and asked Steve to call him later. But Steve wasn't going to let him go because they had nowhere to go. Steve insisted they were with no demands and no luxury, only looking for a roof to cover them at night, a spot to lay their heads before facing the grind of another day. That was a difficult request, as Anthony would have to give thought to his security. For Steve's genuineness, he decided to be kind. As luck may have it, Anthony returned to his house, accompanied by Lawrence and Steve. Without doubt, Anthony was indeed a kind man. Upon seeing Anthony's younger sister, the finished man lost control of himself and glued his eyes to her beauty until Steve helped him to regain sanity with a slap. Even so, Lawrence wouldn't take off his eyes. He handed over his laptop to his younger sister, Elsie, and asked her to get something for his guests to drink. Meanwhile, Lawrence had lost total control of himself, but was fortunate that Anthony paid no attention to his actions. Steve didn't want them to push their luck, so while he concerned himself with their situation, he periodically made sure Lawrence wasn't looking at Elsie's direction to avoid being noticed by Anthony. Not long after they settled in, Lawrence sat on a pavement with his mind miles away, thinking about the years slipping by and the weight of his dreams pressing harder on his chest. He wanted more than just survival by being a laborer. He wanted a path, a place where his effort could meet opportunity. He sat on the pavement with his mind fixed on the reason he chose the city. His friend Steve showed up unnoticed. He asked Lawrence what the problem was, but only got a cold response until he insisted. Lawrence told him he was tired already. All he ever wanted was the chance to grow in creativity. His talent was real, he knew it, he feels it, but raw talent alone wasn't enough. What mattered now was growth, shaping it into something the world couldn't ignore. He asked Steve how he could push this gift forward and how he could turn what he can do into what he would be known for. Steve, who believes in the creativity of Lawrence, wasn't going to give his 1 cent a second guess. He gave Lawrence some pointer on why he has to keep believing. He suggested they talk to their benefactor about this raw talent of his, and who knows, he could be of help and probably give him a lead. Alone, he went to their benefactor and told him what has been eating him up. He explained to Anthony what his career as a skit maker meant to him, believing that he has all it would take to be at the limelight. This idea of his resonated with Anthony, who considered it a path in the right direction. Quite so, Anthony mentioned that a lot of persons had made it big pursuing their career in acting. He believed Lawrence could do the same. To foster Anthony's career, he promised to gift him a smartphone with good camera quality and connect him with other content creators in the city at his reach. With Steve's assistance, Lawrence combined skit making and working as a laborer. However, problems started when a chunk load of materials were stolen in the site where they all worked, and the engineer accused Lawrence as he was seen in the site. On that Sunday, the materials had been stolen. Lawrence, who had finished his private business in the site, did not know that the engineer had also come to the site for some inspections. As he sneaked out through the backyard, the engineer stopped him in his tracks.
Lawrence, what did you come for work today?
I forget my key, so you know say like as we work finish now, so I can't forget her. As I wear like my trouser, I can't forget the key. And my guy like the way for me for her, so I just can't carry up. Not to be the same.
Where you forget the key put?
For back now, I make a pass here now. I just the call now. I want to go now, no wahala now.
Safe.
Okay now, say mama.
Despite the blatant lie, he could sense the doubt in the engineer's eyes. But hoped he didn't take it seriously, Lawrence couldn't open up to Anthony the reason he had gone to their site, despite how mad Anthony was at him. He only claimed he didn't steal the materials but failed to reasonably establish the reason he was at the site, as the lie with keys did not hold water. He insisted he didn't steal the materials with a disrespectful tone, and Anthony was never going to condone such attitude again. He asked Lawrence to leave his house, and it was at that point he came back to his senses, started apologizing, but he was not willing to tell Anthony why he had gone there. Lawrence may be creative, but he was quite uncultured. He would go on and on appealing to Anthony, but to no avail. His arrogance had pushed Anthony to the wall, and there was no going back. Lawrence returned to the room to pack up, but was joined by Steve, whose shadow listened to their conversations. Steve, who was seriously packing up his things, had to stop for a moment and asked Lawrence to tell him the truth about what took him to the site on that very Sunday. Lawrence told him that what he went to the site to do was something he couldn't tell the boss. He had gone there to meet with a girl. There was no way he could say that to their boss. Steve found it funny, and instead of concerning themselves with their next line of action, they started laughing over it. Steve claimed he knew it but wanted to be sure, as he couldn't picture anything that could drag his friend to the site on a Sunday. Steve wasn't asked to leave, but there was no way he would abandon Lawrence, who had come to the city on his instance. They already had the platform and needed content creating materials, so they continued creating content around the city while perching around, despite the difficulties. They kept exploring opportunities in content creation until they got a call from the popular Slim Bullet of Port Harcourt. Slim Bullet acknowledged their effort and the fact that he loved their niche. Though he claimed that coming up with a content that will feature them would be a difficult task, he trusted in Lawrence's creativity and asked him to rack his brain and come up with one, promising to take care of the promotion. This was all they had all prayed for, and they couldn't hide their feelings. In less than 1 month of dropping the content with Slim Bullet, they went viral as their contents gained over 3 million views across selected platforms and 500k followers. They both danced in celebration, what Lawrence named the Kubirashi dance, with a face engrossed in explainable and obvious excitement. Months on, Anthony was relaxing in his living room when he heard a knock on his door. It was Lawrence and Steve that had decided to come see him, as Lawrence claimed to have an unfinished business there. Anthony was really excited to welcome the now famous duo to his house after a long time and just a few months of hitting such popularity. To Anthony, it was an honor to host Lawrence and Steve.
Well, I've actually been following your content, and I can see you guys are doing well. You are doing well. I'm very proud. I'm proud.
Thank you, sir.
You know, I already knew you guys had it in you. That's why I supported you earlier. So it's good. It's good.
So, sir,
Lawrence appreciated him for first accommodating them without knowing them from Adam, and secondly, for providing them with basic content creating equipments like the phone and lights. He told Anthony that despite leaving his house, those equipments were the only thing they had to work with. Lawrence went on to tell him what happened that very Sunday. Perhaps he was without fear this time. Just as he didn't deny going there, he made bold to tell Anthony that he was there to be with his younger sister. He couldn't say that to him then, as he never wanted troubles for her. Surprised to hear of what was happening under his roof, Anthony keenly adjusted himself to clearly hear Lawrence. Anthony had traveled a day before that Sunday and was not going to return until the evening hours. They had always met Steve at the site, but he didn't plan to see her that Sunday until she called and informed him that she was at the site waiting for him. Lawrence wasn't expecting the call but showed up. Elsie, who obviously missed him, and that was the only time she would have had the opportunity to be with him before Anthony returns. She barely goes anywhere when he's around. Anthony doubled as her elder brother and father ever since the demise of their parents a few years ago. Though they both had a couple of minutes arguing over their meeting that day owing to Laurence's fear of getting caught. But then what to do, if at all, to maintain peace? She didn't have enough time and left almost immediately while he stayed back a little longer, but met the engineer on his way out. Lawrence told him he had to leave the house than subject Elsie to any backlash from him. He claimed they were deeply in love. As such, he had to keep quiet in a bid to protect their relationship. Be that as it may, he had returned to ask him to give him Elsie's hand in marriage. Anthony didn't make anything out of it, considering that they were both adults. He called on Elsie, who showed up with a smiling face, as Laurence's visit didn't come as a surprise. In truth, Elsie brought the contents of Lawrence and Steve to the knowledge of Slim Bullet, as she kept supporting him. Lawrence assured Anthony that he would take proper care of Elsie, as he confessed in a quiet tone that the strength behind his every step wasn't just his own. It was her encouragement, her patience, and the countless sacrifices she made without asking for recognition. Elsie was a magic wand for him. For both of them, they had come a long way and would finally get to heat together without having to sneak around going forward. Anthony said a few more things before excusing them, while Steve kept shining his teeth like one who had just won a lottery. Well, he who finds wife had found a good thing. Steve was only genuinely happy for his friend and Elsie, and most importantly, he has got a wedding to plan for in the coming weeks for what would be the most talked about couple.